Hey, it's Amy Scott Grant. It's your favorite spiritual ass kicker. Okay, so I might be your only spiritual ass kicker, but that's besides the point. I have two topics I want to talk to you about today. Well, I'm only going to talk about one today, but then you'll see another video and you're like, hey, she's wearing the same outfit and the same lipstick, assuming you notice those kinds of things, because I know I do. And yes, because I'm going to record these back to back because I've got like two topics that are about to burn a hole in my brain if I don't like get these out and get them to you. So I'm calm, grounding. While you're grounding, hey, quick shout out to my buddy Gannon. Oh my God, thank you so much, girl. Mwah. I love that you are helping me support, like you're helping support these videos, right? Because you're one of our top level contributors on Patreon. So I super appreciate you. Thanks for being here. There's your little shout out for this video. Okay, so first topic, energy vampires, right? Our friend in Japan, is it Sherry or Cherie? Send me a PM and let me know, because I know it can be pronounced either way, and I'd love to know how you pronounce it. So Sherry/Cherie is our expat friend in who married Japanese man. Have you heard this story? If you've been reading the comments, you already know all this about her, right? I'm not like saying anything you don't know if you read the comments in the Patreon post. But anyway, she said something about like, how do you deal with somebody that just seems to like suck all your energy out of you? Well, we call those energy vampires. I didn't coin that phrase, but kind of wish I had, because it's like super fitting, right? And like after you've been around an energy vampire, you just feel like, you just feel drained, right? Like they suck all of the life out of people. It's like if the Dementors were real in Harry Potter, they would be real people walking around known as energy vampires, okay? Why does this happen? I don't know. It's a number of reasons. Like they could, it could be like a person who's narcissistic, right? And they're like sucking their narcissistic supply from you. So it could be people that just like take. I also find people that complain like a ton. For me, those are energy vampires too. Like people that are like, you know, my mom used to say there's certain people in the family that you just don't want to ask, how are you doing? Because you know you're going to get like this litany of problems, you know, well, you know, my bursitis is acting up and blah, blah, blah. And so is cancer, if you heard. And it's like on, and they just don't even want to go there. Right? So like really heavy duty complainers, people that are super negative, people that are very toxic, narcissistic, and certain types of untreated mental imbalances can really have the effect of an energy vampire. So when you have been around somebody and you feel completely depleted, now I don't mean like your best friend's going through a hard time and you want to be there for them and it's like exhausting because it's emotional and cathartic and whatever. I'm not talking about a one-off. I'm talking like you can't stand to be around this person because they are just draining. They drain your energy. You feel depleted every time you've been around them. It can also be people that are manipulative, take advantage, all that. That's what we call energy vampires. Okay? And so Sherry/Cherie, which I will continue to call her until she corrects me and tells me how to properly pronounce her name. Sherry/Cherie in Japan said, how do you deal with people like that? Wow, that's a really good question, you know? And my first advice is freaking avoid them at all costs, right? What, like, for real, if you knew somebody was really a vampire, Twilight love story aside, what would you do? Would you be hanging out with them? Would you be like going over to their house? Would you feel like obligated to do stuff for them? Hell no. And if you did, you better believe you'd have some kind of protection on, right? Like you'd have my new scarf. You don't like it? It's garlic. What? No, it's good for the skin and the circulation and lots of other things. No, it has nothing to do with you. It's just garlic. It's the trend, really. Like, yeah, you'd have some protection, right? You'd have like your holy water and your cross, whether you believe it or not. You'd have like all the stuff we've seen from the horror movies. You wouldn't stake. I think that would be in a vampire survival kit. Holy water, wooden stake, garlic, and cross. Yeah. If you have like a priest or an exorcist, I'd probably bring them too. But yeah, that's probably your basics right there. No, for the first thing you would do is totally avoid them. Okay. You would be like, no, thank you. I like my blood in my body. I like my neck without puncture wounds. So just, no, gonna pass. Hard pass on the vampire thing. right? But there could be reasons why we think we have to tolerate these people in our life, these energy vampires, right? Maybe it's a member of your family, so maybe you have to see them at certain events. Maybe it's your ex and you're co-parenting. That's kind of hard to get around, right? You can certainly minimize contact, but that type of energy vampire situation is tricky. Maybe it's your boss. Boy, I'd be putting up a mirror treatment. I tell you what, be like, time to move on. All that crap needs to go back to you. We'll talk about mirror treatments another time if you don't know. I would definitely, you wouldn't, if you had to be around them and there was truly, first off, consider that there's ways to avoid them. Okay? It might mean that you aren't always caving, right? Like we know pleasers and middle children and human design projectors tend to do. They like harmony, value harmony, want to be people pleasers. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. My middle child just said that to me the other day. Like, I said, you could speak up and tell so-and-so blah, 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 and that would be fine. And she's like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And I'm like, okay, but that's fine. But there's ways to say what's on your mind in a way that's firm but kind, so that you're not hurting their feelings, you're getting your needs met. And if they get their feelings hurt, it has nothing to do with you. So that's a little lesson. Sidebar, little lesson I'm working on with the middle child, who, by the way, is also a projector, right? Dang, double whammy. So did I mention how much I love Gannon? Yay. Just throwing that in again. All right, let me think. So tip number 1 would be avoid them. And as a subset of that, if you're like, yeah, but there's no way I can avoid this person, come at that from a different angle. Okay. Like there's almost always a way. Like I said, if it's your ex and you're co-parenting, yes, there's a certain degree of communication that has to happen, and we'll cover that in step 2, but minimize contact if you can't eliminate it completely. Right. The second thing is to put protection mechanisms in place. So you could actually put an energy protection around your system when you know you're going to be with this person. I have to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of protection systems because ultimately, okay, they need to be used with temperance, okay? Because in my experience in working with tens of thousands of people all over the world, my experience is that that protection mechanism can't be your go-to, because what happens is you put up a protection mechanism, it works, and then you put up another one, and the next time, and every time crap keeps happening, you keep putting up protection mechanisms, and next thing you know, you're behind a 10-foot deep wall, right, of protection, and you're like, I feel so isolated and lonely, like, no, I can't, no one will get close to me. Yeah, because you put up all these freaking protection mechanisms. Okay, so they really have to be used with temperance. And don't let that become like your go-to solution, okay? But they can be very useful when used prudently, especially in like the situation that I'm talking about. Now, if you have like 8 energy vampires in your life, something's up with you, okay? Like, why are you attracting all these people? Why are you tolerating and allowing all these people in your life, okay? And so if you start putting up walls, you're going to feel very isolated and boxed in, like I was talking about. But if you have like one and you're like, well, I can't really get away from this person because of XYZ situation, which won't change until, X number of years in the future or whatever, then a protection mechanism can be useful when interacting with that one person. And what I normally recommend is you set up something that is like Teflon, so that whatever they're directing at you, if you think of like water beating up on a duck's back, or Rain-X, if you're familiar with that product, people put it on their decks. It makes water like beat up, so nothing can get in, nothing can penetrate, and it's invisible, and it's sheer, and it's thin, and so that's like kind of all the things you want in a protection mechanism, right? You don't want like a giant chastity belt around your energy field. That's not going to be good for anybody, right? And not just your sex life. Okay, so that's the second thing you could do, is you can set up a protection mechanism. The third thing, which I would highly recommend, is to do, if one isn't an option, and whether or not you've put 2 into place, here's recommendation number 3, is to do some treatment before and after. Okay, so before you have to see this person, you can delineate certain boundaries. And these are, what I'm talking about are like commitments that you make with yourself. Like, let's say that you are co-parenting, because that's the only example I can think of where you like absolutely have to be around this person, right? Let's say you're co-parenting, and let's say that money is like the hot button, like the ultimate trigger in conversations. And if money comes up, the whole conversation's going south really fast. Okay? You could make a commitment with yourself that you are not going to engage in any kind of conversation about money. Okay? Now, there may be conversations that need to be had because Junior needs XYZ and you got to discuss how you're going to pay for it. But those might be way more like comfortable for you to have via text or email or with attorneys present rather than face to face. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you're like setting up certain parameters, not with them, because energy vampires have no concept of boundaries. They're not going to follow your parameters. If they had any clue the effect they were having on people, they wouldn't be energy vampires. Okay. So, this is really about you setting up the boundaries with yourself and making commitments to yourself, right? So if you're like, okay, so if money comes up, I don't want to talk about money. So how will I divert that conversation? Like, how will I get out of that piece of the conversation so that I'm not engaging in a conversation about money with my toxic ex, for example? Okay. Let's say that it's your boss. I would really say, like, if you love your job, set up mirrors, get rid of that boss. But if you can't, start looking for another job. But for now, let's say you're stuck with your boss. And let's say that the most painful topic that comes up with your boss is when you have to ask for time off of work. Like if you have a doctor's appointment or you want vacation or whatever. Again, I would think, okay, what is the least uncomfortable way to address that? Right? Because face-to-face is probably the most uncomfortable. Usually with an energy vampire, you get zapped the quickest if you're like physically in their presence. Okay, so that's what you really want to avoid. So if it's a particularly taxing topic, then figure out, what's appropriate. Can I put it in an email? Can I leave a note on her desk? Can I, text it to her? Can I... you don't want to send a memo. It shouldn't be like a stupid method of communication. That would be, or a fax. If she's in the office 3 doors down from you, you're not going to fax her. Here's my time off. But if there is a policy, if your company has a policy, like maybe it's supposed to be submitted to HR in writing, but people generally talk to their supervisor ahead of time, well, then you might want to go ahead and submit it in writing and like give a heads up by email 3 minutes ahead of time to your supervisor, right? So think about ways you can minimize contact, especially about hot button issues. And then keep that commitment, right? Don't get sucked in, because that's another thing energy vampires do is they like suck you in, and you're like arguing and you're like, why am I arguing with a crazy person? I must be the idiot here. If I'm arguing with a crazy person, what does it matter with me? It will help you tremendously to set those boundaries before you go into that connection. So I think Sherry/Cherie's original question was, how do you get out of a conversation with a energy vampire? But the answer that I'm giving you, if you hadn't noticed, is something that like one of my first dive instructors ever told us was the best way to solve a problem is not to have a problem, right? So that was his way of saying like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So he would be like, okay, so we're going to go into this dive trip, like heading off any potential dangers at the past, and then that way we'll have less problems to solve while we're underwater. We could just like have fun and look at the sharks and the fish and the coral and have a good time, right? So same kind of thing, same kind of advice I'm giving you is like the best way to get out of a conversation with an energy vampire is to not get into a conversation with an energy vampire, right? To minimize and mitigate and have situations in place. Now I said for number 3, there was something to do before and something to do after. That's what you do before, is you set your boundaries. Right? Make sure that you're grounded. While you're in there, ground. If anything happens that upsets you, ground. Is if you have that protection mechanism in place, even if it's temporary, that's going to help you as well. And then when you leave, clean your energy. So as soon as you get out of their presence, assuming you have to be around them, as soon as you get out of your presence, make sure that you clear your energy. Don't sit in that funk for the rest of the day, because it'll just stew and grow, and like think about like energetic bacteria and mold growing. Ugh, nasty, gross. All right. So there you go. There's your information on energy vampires. And oh my God, I'm going to record another video for you like right now, which you probably won't get for a week, but I'm so excited. I can't help it because this is such like an up topic and I can't wait to talk to you about it. So thanks for being here. I love that you're here. I love that we're building this community here on Patreon, and I'll see you in the next video.